Welcome back, everyone, to session 4. Amazing. This is midday, and we've had 3 sessions, 3 wonderful sessions already. So now I'm just going to hand over to our next speaker, who's going to be talking about risk management in learning design. This is a topic that I haven't heard anyone speak about it before. And Ademola, I've listened to him speak about it while taking a session at the Learning Network. And I can promise you that you're in for a fantastic time. So over to you, Ademola. Please introduce yourself the best way you want people to remember you. So, yeah, over to you.
Yeah, sorry. Good afternoon. Please confirm you can hear me. I didn't know I was muted earlier. Just in the
Oh,
chat. Just,
yeah, loud and clear. Loud and clear.
awesome.
People too should
Um,
confirm in the chat, please.
yeah, Adelinka, thank you. I think Adelinka is the only one that can hear me. Okay, awesome. Thank you, KJ. Okay, great, and welcome to the fourth session. I think it's been fantastic. I joined the Nicola session, and I was here earlier when we were introducing ourselves. I think I would say a big thank you to the ELID team and Oida for putting together this initiative. It's a great opportunity to share knowledge and also to learn. I think when everyone introduced themselves, I was able to gather that we have a global audience here. So it's good to know. I've got 30 minutes to just speak through this topic. I planned it to be an interactive session, so I'll be asking some questions and I hope to get feedback from everyone, at least most people on the call. I say we have about 30 people on the call, so I don't think that should be a difficult ask. But before we go into it, yeah, Grace, thank you. Before we go into it, please confirm in the chats if you're currently or previously or maybe in your role, you are within the e-learning space. Please just drop an emoji with a thumbs up just so that I know that you're in the e-learning space. And if you're not within the e-learning space, use a smiley emoji. Oh, okay, wonderful. Seems everyone is in the e-learning space. Oh, great. Oh, awesome. Sorry, I can hear a feedback. That from me. Oh, good. So about myself, my name is Ademola Johnson, fondly called the L&D James Bond, and I hope that by the end of this session, you probably agree with me that I'm the L&D James Bond. And I have over a decade of experience in L&D, and a typical experience of started from the bottom. Now we're here because I started from the grassroots of the L&D functions. I held the role of an L&D coordinator, and then gradually moved. I became an e-learning developer and also an instructional designer. And if you're new to e-learning, you'll probably be confused with why I have e-learning developer and instructional designer in a separate space. But back then, when I was an e-learning developer, the only thing I was doing was developing e-learning courses. You bring the content, the storyboard, and then I develop. I don't have information of who the target audience were. Nothing. Just give me the content, and then I develop. And then gradually, I started getting myself involved in audience analysis, impact analysis, the design itself, the definition of learning objectives, and that was when I had the instructional design title. I also had to manage LMSs at some point. I facilitated trainings, and surprisingly, I used to facilitate instructional design and e-learning development alongside other soft skill leadership programs. And then I became the head of a learning function at some point. And currently, I hold the title of an L&D project and innovation specialist, where I pretty much work behind the scenes to design processes, to design policies, test tools, look for tools to use for various e-learning value chain, whether it is for classroom delivery, in person, virtual, or even online. And I've worked in quite a number of industries in the consulting, finance, technology, and manufacturing, as you can see on the screen. And one more thing is that I founded an initiative called the OLXD. It's a community of L&D professionals out of Africa. And pretty much what we do is build the L&D capabilities through webinars, fiscal hangouts, and the likes. I've gotten feedback sometimes that I talk too fast. So if I'm talking too fast, please call my attention to it so that I can slow down. Most times when I'm really passionate about something, I tend to just go on and on and on and on and on about it. But I'm also watchful of the time, so I'll try as much as possible to give room for questions and answers. So going into the topic, risk management in e-learning. Just in the chats, when you saw this topic in the outline, what was your impression about it? What came to your mind, and what were you looking to get from this session? Aside from those that I am twisted to join the session, every other person that joined willingly. In the chat, please let me know what came to your mind when you saw the topic risk management in e-learning design, and what are you looking to get from it? Because of time, I'll just be looking out for maybe 2 or 3 responses, and I'll wait for the responses before I move on. So who's going first? Anyone? Compliance. Okay. Thank you. Who else? Awesome. Conley, thank you. Value to the company. Sarah. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So yeah, so let's go into it. We'll find out if it's what you've written so far. So let's start with this scenario. Imagine this morning you woke up to this email from the ELID team saying that we regret to inform you that due to unforeseen circumstances, the conference has been cancelled and a new date is going to be communicated. How would you feel about this email coming to you this morning about the conference? In the chat, please, how would you feel receiving this email this morning? Absolutely. Disappointed, thrown off balance. Anyone else? And in the body of the email, you can see that, yeah, you have been invited to other events that they might be having. Will you click on the link to even see the other events? Absolutely. Okay, good. I mean, Camilla has faith and hope, which is good. Not if they cancel them. Absolutely. So the question we now ask ourselves is, what could cause it? Like, what would have happened that made them send the email? What do you think? Like, what's the worst scenario that would have played out that would make the organizers who have been advertising an event for a while, then on the morning of the event, cancel it? What do you think would have caused it? Speaker illness, possibly. What else? Technical issues, speaker not available. Absolutely. And then could anything be done to prevent it? Because these are things that right now, even before planning the event, we can think about it. But do you think there could have been processes in place to prevent or to mitigate these things from happening? Exactly. Maybe having backup speaker if it is a speaker cancelled. Maybe having another technology in place if it's technical issues. Exactly. And I like the fact that we are all responsible, because this is putting us into the space, exactly, plan B. But what exactly is the plan B? Because plan B is ambiguous. So you also need to think of the outcome, think of the issue, then create a plan B for it. And that's what risk management is really about. So before we go right into what it is that we're going to do, this is just a pretty short outline. I think I have like 13 slides, if I remember correctly. It's pretty short. And you see that my heading is what we plan to cover. Again, this is me managing a risk. Just in case we don't cover it, you wouldn't hold me to the fact that I said what we will cover. So these are what we plan to cover. And then we're open to cover what a risk is. We're open to cover the risk cycle, risk management process, and most importantly, how to apply the risk thinking in our e-learning project. Because things can go wrong, and when they do go wrong, they're going to have some significant impact that might not be easy for us to clean our names. For example, some people had already said that they are not going to check out the upcoming event if one of the events has been cancelled, which is a major risk that we need to look out for. So going right into it, what is a risk? Like I said, one of our outline is defining what a risk is. And by definition, a risk is any uncertain event that can affect outcomes or that can affect the objectives that you've set. And the interesting thing about that is that it can be positive or negative. Oftentimes, when we hear the term risk, we quickly attribute the risk to negative. But in the actual definition of risk, a risk could be positive or negative. The thing that makes a risk is the fact that it's going to affect the outcome. And I'll give an example. So you have a video course. Maybe you use one of the AI tools to create a video course, or maybe if you're working with a group and the course was sent down to your own company to distribute it to your audience, and you don't have a learning management system. Right now, within the team, you are thinking of how you're going to disseminate the course. So you are considering whether you're going to use Teams, or maybe you send it as an email, or maybe you're going to facilitate an online session. And maybe at the end of the day, you agree to facilitate a live session on Teams and then just show the video and speak to it, which was your solution. Then 2 weeks to this scheduled session, there was an approval. Maybe there is an LMS from the old code from the group, for example, and there was an approval that the LMS can also be used by your team to get the video out. That approval, that LMS that is now made available, is going to ease your delivery, which is positive. But the fact that it is affecting the outcome that you have planned, which was to deliver it as a live session, makes it a risk. However, for the purpose of this session, we'll be talking about the negative risk, which is what we're used to. The positive risk are called the opportunities, which again, if they come, we'll definitely appreciate and accept them. But for the negative risk, these are the ones that we need to really, really plan for and make sure that they don't affect our initiative or our outcome. But now there's one thing we always need to know about risk, that it's a cycle. Oftentimes we focus on the tail and not necessarily the head of the risk. And when I say the tail and head, I'm talking about what we currently have on the screen, which is the cause, events, and impact. Now, the cancellation of the conference, if we received that email this morning, what do you think it is if we are looking at it from the risk cycle? Are we going to say it's the cause? Are we going to say it's the event? Or are we going to say it's the impact? Just peep at the definitions you have on the screen and let me know what you think. The cancellation of the conference, what category will it fall into? Is it going to be the cause, the event, or the impact? I see Grace said impact. Okay. Anyone else? Evelyn said impact. Okay. One more person. Cost, impact. So I think impact is winning. Stephanie said cost. However, the cancellation of the conference actually is the event. The impact is what happens when you receive that email. Now, when you receive the email, you're going to be disappointed. You are not going to, some people will not patronize the establishment again. Some people would write a negative review on the platform, and when they write a negative review, others will see it, and then it will also affect the business. So the event is the cancellation of the conference. The cause is what made it happen, which is what I asked, that what could cause it. And that's why it's always good, and I always like sharing this, because oftentimes we mislabel some of these things as cause or event or as impact. The cause is the underlying reason, what made it happen, what was the trigger, and that is what we are really focusing on when we talk about risk management. The event is what happened at the end of the day. The event was cancelled, and I'll show an illustration after this slide just to also buttress this. And then the impact is when it happened, what was the domino effect? How did people feel? How did it affect our reputation? And if you look at organizations that do broader enterprise risk management, they categorize their impact into a lot of things. They have the legal risk, they have the reputational risk, and these are risks that if the event occur, it's going to affect their reputation, or they are going to have legal issues. And this is just an illustration to buttress this point of cause, impact, or cause, event, and risk. From the slide, you'll see that, I mean, if I ask anybody, you can tell that she slipped. Sleeping in this case is the event, because that is what has happened. Now, what happens after she has slipped? She could break her ankle, right? That is one. The company that this happened in might get legal sanctions, or she might sue them to say, okay, they spilled water on the floor and the likes. But what is the cost? Which is what we are going to look at when we're talking about risk. What caused it? Could that cause have been prevented, or could it have been mitigated or reduced? In this case, we would say that, oh yeah, they had a caution sign. The other question is, was the caution sign visible? Was it put place where it should have been? Or maybe the place could have been blocked totally from people to access. And those are some things you also need to look at when you are thinking of risk. We are still going to relate this to e-learning, but I just want us to get the concept of risk management, understanding the costs. These are things that trigger an event, and then when the event occur, they end up having an impact that may affect the entire organization or even your e-learning project. Do we have any questions before I go in? I like to check in the pulse of the attendees. If you can still hear me, please drop a thumbs up. If you have any questions, please drop that question so that I can quickly look into it. Awesome. 2 people, thank you. To the 2 people that gave a thumbs up, thank you. The others, okay, now thank you everyone. So now going into e-learning development, I'm sure, I mean, most of us we are in the e-learning space, so we are very familiar with the ADDIE framework. And yeah, whilst this is not the only framework, I mean, this is like the most popular framework, and I thought I would use this as a reference. One of the things I mentioned earlier at the beginning is that when we are looking at the risk, we are looking at the outcome. It is based on the outcome that we calculate the risk, or that we determine what the risk is, and then we can now mitigate it. And what I've done in this case is looking at the different phases of ADDIE, what are the potential outcomes that we may get? Now, this might not necessarily be your own outcome. In some cases, you might get outcomes that are more than this. In some cases, you might get lesser outcomes depending on the scope of your phases. However, I've just chosen this to say, okay, maybe if you're doing your analysis, for example, at least the very least, you want to get what the learning or performance needs are, what the audience are at the very least. In some cases, you might not necessarily do your task or job analysis, but you'd also want to know the technology that is available to develop your courses, and maybe the technology that is available to deploy your courses. So that's where you're either considering your authoring tools, or you're considering your learning management systems. And the other stakeholders' requirements, depending if your stakeholders' requirement has not been gathered in your learning objectives. I know in the past there were some organizations that we developed e-learning courses for that defined how they want their models to look like in terms of the kind of dressing they want the models to wear. That's the virtual models, the kind of accent they want the models to have. If some of them define the fonts they want, the font sizes they want for the headers and the footers and the likes, depending on their brand. So those are some of the things that fall into the stakeholders' requirements. And then we look at the design phase, which is typically where you have your storyboard, the design approach, the assessment strategy, whether you're going to use your formative assessment or your summative assessment, and then the visuals, what kind of visuals are you using? Are you using your flat images and the likes? But I'm not going to speak into everything. But the question I would ask is, for each of these phases, and I want you all to look at each of these phases and pick one of the phases that interests you. From that phase that interests you, pick one of the lines and tell me what could go wrong in getting your output of that line. So if, for example, you are looking at the analysis phase and you say, okay, learning needs is the line you want to pick. what do you think can go wrong in gathering the learning objectives? If you're looking at the design and you say, okay, storyboard is what interests you, what do you think can go wrong in getting that final storyboard? So I'll give us about 3 minutes for us to look at what is on the screen, look at a face that interests us, look at one of the topics with or one of the outcomes within the face, and just put in the chat what you think can go wrong, or can prevent you from getting that outcome. I would wait. Who's going first? Waiting. Do we understand the question, or do you want me to explain it again? If you want me to explain it again, just drop re-explain and I will re-explain. Learner profile under analysis phase. Okay, Albert, what do you think can go wrong in that, with that outcome? Accessibility issues, awesome. So I've seen Albert. Albert, what could go wrong? Carol, thank you for that. Waiting for others to join. I think this is just 1 minute. Okay, Everly. So what I'm asking is, looking at the faces on the screen, I've defined the 5 phases of the ADI process, and I've also listed some of the outcomes from each of these phases. Now, when we are looking at risk, what we are looking at is what can go wrong, or what it is that can affect our outcome. So I want you to look at these phases, look at the outcomes that I've listed within each of the phases, select any of the phases that you want, and say, for this particular outcome, this is what I think can go wrong. This is what I think can affect us from getting the required outcome. Does that make sense? When you catch it, the delivery of passive concept might not be as intended. Okay. So you catch it, that is from the development side, because that's when you are applying the, but okay, that works. Budget constraints, that's from the analysis phase. Absolutely. Any stage can go wrong without monitoring carefully. Yeah, absolutely. But what I want is, I want you to look at just one of the outcome and pick one outcome and tell me what you think can affect that particular outcome. I think a pilot phase is needed before implementation. Okay, the pilot phase is you already mitigating a risk. And that's what happens when you are designing processes. Some of the processes that we have as of today have some risk mitigants in place to mitigate a risk that we've already foreseen. So the reason you do a pilot is because you want to prevent something from happening. So, but yeah, I hope that's so you're already answering some of the questions that you're already putting solutions in place for the problem. Learner profile under the analysis phase issue with empathy. Awesome. So thank you. If you still have, I see Grace also mentioned malfunctioning of elements in development. Awesome. If you still have any addition you want to put to this comment, please feel free to add it. And we'll be writing on some of these things that you've shared as we proceed in this session. Going into risk management, which is again what the topic is about. Risk management is the process of identifying the risk. Now, once you've identified the risk, which is some of the things that you've done, you're going to assess it, which is where you're going to check if it's a worthy risk, a risk to be really careful about, or a risk to have concern for. And then you are going to respond to that risk whenever the event occurs. So the definition is the process of identifying, assessing, responding to potential events that could negatively, again, because we are speaking to the negative risk in this place, affect the success of a project or a product. In this case, it affects the success of the outcome that you have defined. And there are 4 steps in risk management process. I mean, from the definition already gave it out, which is to identify, to access, and the responding is what we have broken down into 2, which is the plan and implement. And the interesting thing is that whilst you might have identified, assessed, and planned for a risk, you might not necessarily need to implement if the event does not occur. So if, for example, you've said that for a course you are developing, there are situations where you would reach out to stakeholders, the SMEs. And I mean, we have challenges with SMEs sometimes where you reach out to the SMEs and they would not respond. So as a mitigation, you said you are going to send them 3 emails, and then if they don't respond to the 3 emails, you are going to escalate to their line managers. If they don't respond, then maybe you escalate to the project manager first. If they don't still respond, you escalate to the line managers. And if if that does not work within a particular period of time, you pause the project. And if you're a consultant, for example, it probably will have been in your agreement that if the delay to the project is from from the SMEs, that you are still going to charge the company for that. These things that I've mentioned are there to mitigate a delay in your SME from responding, a delay in your SME. Now, whilst you've planned that, and you can see all the things that you've put in place just for that one risk, whilst you've planned that, you might not have to implement it because maybe when you send email to your SMEs, they responded. It might be because they've also seen your documentation about all the escalation processes and the cost that it would be on them if they don't respond. But I mean, the whole idea is that whilst you've assessed and see that it is a very serious risk to mitigate and you've put it in place, you might not necessarily need to implement. So it's not about making sure, looking for a way to always implement all your plans, is to make sure that you have them just in case things go out of hand. You put them into play. So just speaking to each of them one after the other. The identify is to look at the outcome and say what could go wrong. And that's what we just done earlier when we looked at the ADI process to say, you know what, these are the outcomes that we may have. What can go wrong in this case? In our learning objectives, it could be that we didn't define the objectives well, or maybe we engaged the wrong SME, or we engaged a wrong focus group that gave us a wrong objective. For example, I think sometimes last year, we had to design a training program for an organization. I mean, while I was working in a former place. And we had gotten the request from the training coordinator within the organization, say, you know what, we want to design a training for our secretaries to teach them how to be better secretaries. We want them to understand these secretariat duties and the likes. Now, when we got that feedback, when we got that request, as part of our own process of designing programs, we always like to do the focus group or some one-on-one conversation with the target audience and also some of the stakeholders to say, okay, what is really going on? Now, when we spoke to all the secretaries, we realized that they understood their roles as secretaries, but the challenge is that they didn't know how to manage their supervisors. So based on that report, based on that feedback, we wrote to the company that we've done this assessment to ensure that, to know what really the problem is. And we are advising that rather than doing a secretariat training, let us do a managing upward training. In that case, we're teaching them how to, first of all, manage themselves and also manage their bosses. Now, this, if we didn't have that step of doing our focus group in place, we would have delivered a training, which in our own case, it's going to be good, definitely, but there's no impact at the end of the day. And when there's no impact, it's going to have a negative impact on us because they would think that they've trained their secretaries on stuff and then the secretaries are not doing anything. So those are some things that we put in place to just mitigate the risk of having poor learning objectives. And again, back to this, just the activities we've done before. We've already looked at our outcome, and then we've been able to identify some of the risks that may happen. Let me look at, in terms of storyboards, for example, one of the challenges might be that the storyboard is not sufficient enough for the e-learning developer to use. Now, in some cases where you have different people working on some part of the project, somebody designs your storyboard and then gives it to another e-learning developer. The idea of the storyboard being presented to the e-learning developer is that it's sufficient enough to guide the e-learning developer to develop whatever it is that has been defined in the analysis phase, and also based on the content and expected output to the best requirement as possible. So also talking about the images required, also talking about the language request, also talking about the accessibility request. Now, if your storyboard is not well designed, then it means that whenever the e-learning developer gets the content, they would develop something that, I mean, based on the storyboard is okay, but at the end of the day, it's not going to meet the objective. So what are you now going to put in place to make sure that after the storyboard has been designed, maybe there's some level of approval or somebody reviews it again before it now gets into the e-learning developers bits. So those are things about identifying the risk and then putting mitigants in place to prevent those risks from becoming an event. Because once they become an event, what you now start doing is that you are dealing with an issue. Now, the second step is the assessment. And when you're assessing your risk, you are doing two things. You are checking the probability of it happening, and you are also checking the potential impact. And the probability of it happening is how often does this even occur for us to take it serious? Now, if there is a risk that does not happen at all within your environment, and I'll give an example. Say the SME is not available at all. Now, before you even start an e-learning project, or before you start a course development project, you identify who your SMEs are, and then you get their concurrence. But as it happened before that, you started a project and there was no SME at all. If that has not happened before, then the probability is going to be low. Now, it doesn't mean that because the probability is low, doesn't mean that the impact would be low. Because if for any reason the SME is not available, then the project cannot go on. So whilst the probability is low, if it happens, the impact is really going to be high. So you can rate the probability low and then the impact low, the impact high. And then depending on how, as an organization, depending on your risk appetite, you can now determine how you want to handle it. And I've just shared this risk matrix, which is what risk managers use to categorize their risk. Again, depending on your organization, you can determine which of the numbers fall into the high and then which of the numbers fall into the low. But what they've just done here is to draw the probability and impact matrix. So, okay, you know what? When a risk, and they've used 4:1 or 1:4. So when a risk is, the impact is high and the probability is high, and if they fall between 12 and 16, they are red dots. If they are red dots, it means that we stop everything we are doing and we try to make sure that we put mitigations in place. If they are yellow or amber, maybe they are still mild. Again, depending on how you define them based on the probability and the impact. And that's why we need to really know what our outcome is. If we go back to the ADI chart I had shown earlier, what I had shown was the outcome from those phases, not the activities that you did, but what are you looking to get? And when you're looking at risk, you are looking at what you are looking to get from each of the phases. So you define this the probability metrics that way, so that once you have those things, you can, and when you are doing your risk assessment bit, or you identify your risk, it's always good to be exhaustive as much as you can. Put anything possible. I know when our ERG team, that's enterprise risk governance team, asked me to draw out risk, I draw out as many things as possible. Things around even access to the platform, maybe incorrect password, maybe network issues, draw it out. Now, at the end of the day, some of them might still fall under the lower CADA, which is the low between 2 and 1, because maybe they rarely happen, or maybe they don't even happen at all. And if they happen, there's really not much impact to the business. But then it's good to have it all out, and then you can now determine which of the risks you want to mitigate or plan for. And that brings us to this planning bit, which is what do you do to that risk? And there are 4 things you can do when you've identified your risk. You can either avoid them. So, for example, if you're meant to use an SME that is in another time zone, say, for example, 6 hours apart, and you feel like the SME is really, really good, you can decide to say, you know what, can we get another SME, because you fear that maybe the time zone might be a risk and will not be able to, will not allow you to work well with them. Or you say, okay, you know what, maybe we use somebody locally, somebody that at least has the same knowledge. Or so that way you are avoiding that particular risk, or you are not even having the conversation with the person, so that you will not be exposed to that risk. Or in some cases, you transfer the risk. So, and transferring is like insurance. where you assign the task to somebody else to handle. Say, for example, you have a team, an e-learning team, but you know that your team is really, really busy because there are a lot of challenges or there are a lot of courses they are developing in-house, and there is another urgent course that needs to be done. Rather than give it to your team with the hope that they are able to get to it, you can transfer it to another person to do, or transfer it to an outsource it to a third-party consulting firm to develop. Again, that way you are removing the risk of delay in making the course available, and then making sure that at least when you transfer it to those people, because they have the resources, they're able to deliver it and get it to you. The other bit is now to mitigate. Now, we've talked about avoiding it totally, where you're saying, you know what, I don't even want to encounter or be exposed to that risk at all. And another possibility is maybe you want to get an LMS, for example, and then the LMS is charging in foreign currency. You rather just look for an LMS that is locally available, that you are exposed to your currency, than exposed to that foreign currency that is fluctuating. So that is avoid, and then transfer you get it with somebody else. So maybe you just pay somebody to deploy the LMS for you, and they undo whatever international currency that the LMS is, and then you just pay them at your local currency. And then the other bit is to mitigate, which is at this point you are looking for how to reduce the probability of the risk occurring or reduce the impact. And a typical example to reduce a probability, for example, is typos in your e-learning course. And that's example of the pilot example that's just trying to scroll up to the comment earlier. The pilot example that Ricardo shared. So, okay, now, we've developed a course and we want to deploy it on the LMS. Now, some of the things you want to do is you want to pilot it to see if the course plays well, not just as the course is flowing well, but you also want to see if it plays well on the LMS and if it tracks correctly. Now, for those of us that have had experience with the first time I had to develop a course for the Oracle LMS, which uses AICC format, I struggled because that was my first time developing course for Oracle LMS. I wasn't even sure why the course was not tracking. They escalated to Articulate at that point to say, what is going on? But again, that is why we do the pilot, because if you don't do all those things, and you need to be sure of what you are looking to get from your pilot phase. You want to see if the course plays well. You want to see the user experience. When they click on the buttons, are they going where they should go? When they finish the course, is it accepting as it should, or is it tracking as it should? Those are mitigants that you put in place to mitigate possibility of the course not tracking as it should at the end of the day when you deploy it. You want to reduce probability, so typos, and that's why when somebody writes a storyboard, you are giving it to another person to review, and then you are getting somebody else, maybe a committee or a steering committee, to sign off on the storyboard, or maybe even the client or the team to sign off on the storyboard before it goes into developmental phase. And why you are putting all those things in place is just to mitigate the risk of something going wrong at the end of the day. Now, we probably have seen some of these things in our processes already, and sometimes, we inherit processes that we don't even know why. And sometimes when we don't know why, we'll feel like, oh, this thing is just a waste of time, let me take it out. Some of those things are there to manage or to mitigate some of the risks that have been foreseen. And if you get involved in process design often, you would be exposed to all these things and why some of these decisions or some of these reasons were made. For example, if you want to buy a tool, you probably in your organization, depending on the structure, one or two people need to sign it off before you go ahead to buy it. I had an experience recently where we're looking to purchase one of the popular authoring tools. I've overused my time. Oh wow! Again, this is my problem. Okay, so let me quickly round up. So jumping into the accept. Accept is where you are looking to take. You want to accept the risk. You know that the risk is there, but you've weighed it to see that the impact is low. For example, we deployed a course recently, and I need to rush now. Now I'm trying to rush. But you deploy a course recently, and then you see that, maybe one or two of the employees, when they take the course, they receive, maybe when they click on something, the course freezes. Now, if you've only seen it on one employee and you feel like it's something that you can treat on case-to-case basis, then you accept it and you move on and say, okay, it's not a major issue, and then you go on like that. So these are some of the things you can do to risk that you've foreseen. And I've just drawn a risk register that shows your risk description, the impact description. This is what happens if the risk occur, and then the impact level. Remember, we talked about the impact and the probability, and then based on that, it becomes the priority. And then you can also define how it's what makes it severe. Maybe from 0 to 20 is minimum, and then above you make it odd. And then here you have your mitigation notes. Say, okay, what we do if this thing occur? What are we doing to prevent this risk from occurring? And then you have your own. Say, okay, who within the team is going to implement this mitigation plan? And then the implementation is where you actually now put it in place. So one thing I've put here is also the risk incidents log. Again, what we do over time is when you've identified it, you need to monitor those risks and you see if they're happening, so that you can use that to update your risk register. And then what you do is whenever a risk crystallizes, you need to have somewhere that you put it to say, okay, what is the issue statement? What is the risk description, which is similar to the risk description that you've identified here. If it's a new risk that you've not even identified before, it is good to put it here. What did you do to resolve it? Who handled it? And when was it closed? And yeah, so this is just the full steps again, and then going into what you can do from here. I mean, if you don't already have it, I would recommend that you create a risk log for your organization, and then you embed those mitigations into your processes to say, okay, based on the processes, based on the things that we've identified, these are the things we want to be doing differently to mitigate some of those risks. And then the incident log to monitor your risk and update your risk register over time, and also educate your team on risk management. Let them know why the processes are like that, why things are being done in a particular way, so that they don't just go there one day and then decide to remove something from your process, not knowing that it is there to mitigate a risk. And yeah, I think that's about it. So sorry I had gone above my timing. And yeah, you're free to connect with me. My name is Ademola Johnson. I don't even know if we're going to have room for questions, but yeah, if there are any questions, feel free to.
Sadly, no time for questions. This session has run over by about 15 minutes. So I'm so sorry, the panel team, they are waiting. So it's been a very interactive session, actually. So I'm sure people have asked questions, they've interacted, and the session is going to be being recorded and will be shared. And you can always connect with Ademola and ask questions after if you want to. So one thing you should note that on the conference page, there's, if you click on each speaker, you're going to be able to have access to their LinkedIn profile to connect with them. Thank you so much. Let's show some love to Ademola. And on the reflection tree, I've shared the link in this chat. I'll share it again once we get into the next session as well. Let's put our you can see there's so much love for you. Everybody enjoyed the session. Let's put on our reflection on the side that has his name, and let's also make use of the QR code. So with the link, you'll be able to have access to it even while we are not in session. And when you get the recap as well, if you registered on, if you're signed up to Butter, you'll be able to get the recap of all the sessions and be able to watch the videos and all that even before we make them available. So you have access to this on that